Greetings, Afterlifers, and welcome to the first episode of the Afterlife Talks. It's the first episode of the new series. The Minnesota's podcast is no more. And to commemorate this very first episode of the new podcast series, we're going to be talking about Parasite Eve, a 1998 game from Squaresoft, otherwise known as Square Enix. It's a jrpg science fiction survival horror game. And with that said, let's pull the trailer.
Millions of years ago, the mitochondria began to live silently within our bodies. It seems that the parasites have only to live among us. Or do they?
You often heard the phrase "the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell." That's where the quote that's where it came from. This game, Parasite Eve, which, yes, if you've listened to the game trailer and perhaps go find it yourself, then you would realize, wait a minute. So from what I saw, it's one half survival horror, one half science fiction. Yes, from Squaresoft, otherwise known as Square Enix. Yes, so it's a JRPG then. Yes. What? Yeah. Three whole different genres blending in together for this cult classic. I have nothing but positive things to say about the game. I mean, watching that trailer alone, it's just like, whoa, like what am I watching here, right? Uh, Shimomura, the composer for Parasite Eve, cinema. I have nothing but positive things to say about the soundtrack. In fact, the soundtrack, if it's on Spotify, I highly recommend you go find it and put it on Spotify, folks, because the soundtrack is incredible for a game like this. And I say for a game like this because you look at, the Final Fantasy 7, you know, the Final Fantasy the Final Fantasy soundtrack in general. It's classic, Soul Reaver classic, Metal Gear classic, Silent Hill classic, any called classic, iconic PlayStation 1. But you listen to the Parasite Eve soundtrack and you're like, this just sounds like something you would play at a nightclub or a rave, and you would be right. So it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. The story is as science fiction as it can get, and let me tell you, I am so fascinated with the story here, because the TLDR, the best way I can tell you is this: it's basically, what if the mitochondria in our bodies were sentient? I guess, if I'm saying that correctly. And you might pause the podcast episode going, wait, what did he say about the mitochondria in our bodies? What? Yeah. Again, the story is science fiction to the 11th degree, because wow. But what's so fascinating about the story is how believable the characters, how believable the writing is, within the confines of the science fiction survival horror genre, a little bit of jrpg genre, I guess, and this weird conglomerate mesh of the whole 3 different genres into one whole game that is Parasite Eve, right? And I love Aya Bria. Aya Bria is probably one of my favorite video game characters. Put her on the list because to give you an idea, like, you look at Aya Bria, no, not from the 3rd birthday, no, you look at Aya Bria from the first game, and you look at and so basically she Aya Bria is a New York police officer. Now you might pause the podcast again and go, so she's a female Leon then? I would like to say yes and no. Let me tell you flat out that Aya Bria is an incredible character, because here is a character that and the reason why I say yes and no with the Leon comparison, or any Resident Evil comparison, or any character in the survival horror genre, is because she has a job to do and she will see it through no matter how insane the situation gets, which is insane to me. It's insane to me. I'm like, girl, there are people just combusting, and they're people are just like catching on, self combustion, and creatures' bodies are being contorted and opening up new limbs like fucking Dead Space, and all you can say is, yeah, give me the biggest gun you have. She doesn't say that, but her personality drives that home, and I could be wrong. I could be really wrong here, because once you get to the museum part in the first half of the game in disc 1, once you really kind of get of like the basis of the story, don't be surprised if you're like me and going, I don't even know what this game is about anymore, but I am just so fascinated where this all gonna go, where this all gonna go at the end of it all, So problems on the writing. You really really want to watch a retrospective of the entire story for Parasite Eve 1, just so I can just really understand what I was looking at here. Another thing I love about Parasite Eve is the creature design. The creature design and transformation scenes are absolutely iconic. I mean, and I say absolutely iconic here, and you might well say, yeah, I've seen better. But you have to understand that this game has no voice acting, very little sounds, right? You look at the Resident Evil cutscenes and the iconic zombie face turning when you're in the mansion, you're like, okay, iconic, classic. But that opening scene in the opera house, that very first transformation with the sewer rat, you're just like, wow, they really did something with the sound design, because if you hear every bone cracking and aching and the body splits open, the face goes I am trying to not disturb you to disturb you, listener, but these sounds are just insane, and you're just like, yeah, I see where they get inspiration from I see why, you look at the Kurt Russell film, The Thing, right? You look at those transformations and you're like, yeah, I can see where you would say this creature transformation looks like something from The Thing, because yeah, it is that disturbing. There is a sad, disturbing transformation about at the near end of disc 1. If you know which transformation I'm talking about, then keep it to yourself. But you get to that transformation and they just go all out with this one, and I'm like, wow. And yeah, there are transformations later on in the game, but nothing really compares it to that transformation. And it's just like, wow, holy crap. Again, the creature design is amazing, which I'll keep saying it here. Eve, the antagonist, her design is iconic. You have Sephiroth, you have Pyramid Head, you have you have the Tyrant, you have Lisa from Resident Evil 1. Something about Eve and her transformations, like I can just imagine this being remade and just being and everything being, I've said this many times on the Parasite Eve streams, but I'm like, can you imagine this game were to be remade today? And yeah, not many people would want that, and we're gonna get into that part in a second, because the gameplay is something, and it's both good and bad, because, well, I'm gonna explain it in a bit, but yeah, no, Eve's design, I see why people would cosplay, do art of her. The character says very little, and you're so haunted and mesmerized by Eve's design that you yourself are like, man, it's hot in here. It's like, oh god, I'm on fire, So with that said, let's talk about the gameplay, which is where we're going to kind of get into the mixed territory and some issues I have with Parasite Eve. So, as I mentioned before at the beginning of this podcast episode, this game is a combination of jrpg, survival horror, and science fiction. You're looking at that demon baby, and you're like, how does that work? The story, science fiction. Survival horror, the creatures, right? So where does the JRPG element comes in? Well, many years later, after Parasite Eve came out, there was a game, and everyone should know this, Final Fantasy VII Remake. You look at that, and then you look at Parasite Eve, and you're like, wait a minute, is this where the legacy, is this where they got it from, essentially? Like, yeah, you can say, well, then, no, duh, and they didn't get it. Yeah, obviously, but you look at Parasite Eve, and you cannot think of Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? So in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you can hack and slash your way through without being in the line formation like a traditional JRPG. And I believe there's a setting in Final Fantasy VII Remake where you can play it like Parasite Eve, which is insane. It was an insane thing to say, but it's true. Apparently there is a sort of like a turn-based system that you can like activate in the game settings, so you can play it like Parasite Eve almost, or Tales of Berseria, any Tales game, right? A Tales of game. So when you encounter an enemy in Parasite Eve, instead of being a line formation or in this, the screen turns black and you have your character Ayabria, the main character of the game, the creature you're fighting. No, it doesn't do any of that. You can literally move around the area that you encounter the creature in. It's like this little square box, circular type arena, which is why I always call these battle arenas. Always flank them. Always flank them. And you might say, okay, I flanked them. These creatures are easy. Why do I feel like there's a catch? And there is a catch. The game, I love the false sense of security this game gives to players, because it's like, okay, you see the JRPG elements here, and you're like, okay, well, if everything's automated and the bonus points is all on me, then all I have to do is just really follow a guide and just level up properly, and I can survive all the way up until the final boss. Yeah, the final boss. Yeah, the final boss. So let me spell this out. That the game kind of wants you to feel this way, of this false sense of security, which I do love. A little bit of trolling from the team. Maybe this wasn't their intention, but for somebody who's never played a JRPG before, and yeah, this is not a traditional JRPG. And I keep saying JRPG. It should be RPG, but potato, right? But as soon as I got to that last fight, that's when the difficulty ramps up, and it ramps up in a way where it's like, did I level up my weapons wrong? Do I have not enough items? What's going on here? And it was a combination of both, and so I had to scuff my way through that final fight. But, and yeah, let me repeat that. The items you find in the game are a one-time pass. You can't just leave the area, come back in and farm and milk and grind, milk the area out just so you can get more and more items and whatnot. Because by the time you get to this final, throughout the whole game, there's no vendor. There's no true vendor. There is a vendor, but it's really more for your weapons. There's no like buy and sell items and weapons here. There's no economy. It's everything that you find in the over the course of the game. And let me tell you, don't get greedy with the PE. And the PE is the parasite energy, and the parasite energy. The parasite energy is basically your magic. You will get health and spell. You will get spells and yes, health spells along the way that you can use to constantly heal up, and that's great and all. But here's the catch, though: the PE doesn't regenerate until your very next battle. You can't just find a random, like, say you go to NYPD 17, which is the station that I is stationed at. You can't just go there, find her, or you can't just go to a save point and save it, and there's like there's no healing option. There's no rest option. You have to basically wait until the next battle to recharge your PE. And your PE, I absolutely get. Once you get certain abilities, you will get greedy with them. I got greedy a fuck ton at the end of the game because I didn't think tactically. The game wants to basically wants you to think tactically. This is where the RPG portion comes in, and which is why I understand that people will get turned off by that. They're like, oh yeah, I love the trailer, the creepiness of it, the soundtrack of it, the survival horror and the science fiction element of it. You boot that bitch up, and you're like, yeah, okay, you have a hot, sexy, a cop going on a date at an opera house. Okay, an opera house. Everything goes to hell, and then you encounter that very first enemy, and I can tell you, I can feel the immediate turn off once you see that. You're like, ah. My God. But see, here's the cool thing too, though, and which is kind of a boon. If you pick up a machine gun, rifle, and a pistol, grenade launcher, and a rocket launcher at some point. Besides the rocket launcher, every other gun is classified under ammo, which is awesome. Let me tell you, grinding is so important in this game because, and I say it's so important because you need to really canvas the areas that you're going through, especially the optional areas. There are actual optional areas in the game that you have to go through, that you should go through, because they contain items that that you're going to need for future boss fights. Or, well, again, the rocket launcher is used for a specific boss fight, because if you try to just brute force your way through that boss fight, it's going to take a while. But if you get the rocket launcher, it goes down very quickly. But then in the end, it goes back to what I was saying about this false sense of security, because let's say you do use the rocket launcher. It's like, okay, you it's like, okay, where are more rocket launchers? None. There are no more. There's literally no more. Oh, fuck. All I have is the grenade launcher, the rifle, the pistol, machine guns, whatever. Nope. That's it. Good luck on that final boss fight. and oh, you don't have any potions? There's no vendor. There's no economy. You can't buy or sell shit here. So the game wants to think. I love this false sense of security, as I mentioned before. I love this false sense of security, because you can steamroll through this whole game, do the same things I did, and still end up in that same position of, well, crap, I'm stuck here on this last boss fight, so I have to scuff cheese it just to, yeah. And the emulator, I did use the emulator for this one, and there are cheat codes for, Game Shark codes for this, and they worked, and I was able to get through that fight. But I appreciate Square Enix. I appreciate the team kind of trolling the player a bit, because it's like, okay, I got through all these fights, and yeah, obviously the final boss is going to be hard, right? But again, it goes back to, did you level up the guns correctly? Did you understand the stat system? Because again, like any old good old JRPG, the game doesn't really hold your hand. You have to do a lot of research, a lot of understanding of how the upgrading system works here. It's interesting and unique, because you need to find certain items and certain things to give it to a specific vendor in NYPD 17, the police department that you go to, and you need to give that to them in order, and do a little trade and barter here, and then, okay, you can modify your weapon here. You can combine weapons, stats, and abilities to other guns, so that way it doesn't take up your inventory. Yeah, like everything I'm saying right now, you're just like, wow, that's a whole lot. That is a whole effing lot. And um I totally get why people would use a guide at this point, because it's like, man, what guns do I combine, get rid of? What's going on here, right? Because you will find a lot of guns, a lot of armor, and each of these guns and armor have their own special abilities, including the club, your melee weapon. Now we get to the negative portion, the negative side of Parasite Eve. The only thing I can say is the level design in some cases, it's too much sometimes, and you'll end up finding yourself like very lost at times. And there's no map. There's no like, okay, do I take a left turn? No, you have to. Well, first you have to guide yourself, basically. You have to get a guide and really like guide yourself through a lot of these areas, especially a particular big area in the game, because the game doesn't teleport you to the location. It doesn't do anything. You have to watch the cutscene and retrace all your steps back to a certain door. A certain door, but maybe I was tired. Maybe I just didn't. Maybe my brain just completely forgot. But the game doesn't really tell you that you're supposed to go to a certain place within the museum. And yeah, it's the museum. It's the museum part. The museum I got super lost in. Maybe it was me. Maybe I didn't really pay attention, or whatever. I don't know. But the point is, a lot of these level designs are either big or too big for its own good. Code Veronica, basically. Code Veronica had the same problem, where you have all these levels and you're like, okay, I love the detail of some of these levels, but it's just room after room after room after room, and not a whole lot of items, and maybe a battle or two. But even then it gets annoying, right? So imagine you're in this corridor, 6 rooms. Oop, 6 rooms. I have my ice cream right next to me. I have my ice cream next to me. I apologize. So, so you have 6 rooms. You have 6 rooms. And honestly, that metal spoon falling off, this is where my I guess that's the perfect description of my sanity here, because imagine yourself in a corridor. You have 6 rooms you have to get through. Let me describe it to you. You go into room 1. It's a safe room. You go into room 2. Safe room. Room 3, 4, 5, battle room. 6, hybrid room of safe room and battle room if you go onto a certain, like, if you touch a certain sprite within the room. And let me tell you, the sprite thing is so bullshit in this game, especially in that final fight, or any of the boss fights, because if you think it's just safe at a particular spot in the battle arena with these bosses, I can guarantee you, if you let one micro sprite touch you, that goes 50% of your health, 25% of your health, 15% of your health, 10% of your health, all because of a micro sprite touching you. It's that ridiculous. And the museum is a perfect example, but the game, that area just throws battle after battle after battle, and then once you get out of the museum, it's just basically a straight shot, and you're just like, that's the weirdest way to just end it, what? you know but yeah, there's besides the economy and the lack of a vendor, which is, I guess, is a nitpick thing, because I'm so used to the traditional RPGs of having a vendor and having an economy where you can buy and sell shit. I don't really have nothing else to say about the game, on the negative standpoints, but the positives are just endless. I can sit here and talk about hours and hours about how, like, I just love everything about Parasite Eve, from the soundtrack, from the creature and monster design, the cutscenes, I think I mentioned the soundtrack already. I want to mention it again because the soundtrack is incredible, and I highly recommend you get the soundtrack on your Spotify, on your music playlist. But again, the game does feel, but then we get to the gameplay portion, and that's when the game kind of like pushes itself a bit in between the realms of, okay, this is fun, tedious, frustrating, all kinds of emotions, right? um and the game doesn't really tell you, but you have to think tactically, and if you're not a tactical gamer, you're probably going to get this game. You're probably going to be one of the many people out there who looked at the game trailer, watched people play it, or just look at the game trailer alone and going, I want to play that game. You get the game after doing some research on it, don't want to get spoiled. As soon as you get to that first battle in the opera house, I don't know how, I can just feel people getting turned off by those systems. But again, as I said, the game is easy to a detriment, because again, the false sense of security gives you this blanket of protection, and then you get to the bosses and you're like, okay, now I see, right? Or you get into situations where enemies are bullet sponging, and you're like, okay, now I understand, right? I understand why I should flank a lot, why I should use specific weapons, why I should upgrade specific weapons, why I should use the magic system in the game for emergencies only, or for certain things, right? So, but that said, um I rambled on too much already, but if you haven't already guessed it, it's a 10 out of 10. It's a 10 out of 10. Well, I would say, you know what? I want to see what I want to see something here. I want to see. Yeah, I would say I would give it that. I would give it a Yeah, I would give it like an 8 out of 10. I would give it like an 8 out of 10. Again, the game is great, but but without going to spoilers, the story is a big part of it. The story does start off very straightforward and simple, but then it branches off into like deep science fiction stuff that will just melt your brain, literally. And then of course you have this weird combination of of RPG systems and survival horror and the science fiction element, and you're just like, what kind of game is this, right? But if you can power through this game and power through the game mechanics and understand what the game is asking you to do as the player, then you will have a fun time with this game. You're probably gonna end up in the same spot as I am, where I'm like, where I'm like, and you're like, yeah, it's a great game, but they could have done things differently here. They could have made sections a lot smaller and shorter and simple. Love the classic JRPG backgrounds. You're like, oh yeah, but something about navigating these levels and everything. Yeah. So if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, the very first episode of the Afterlife Talks, then leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this Let's Play, then check Let's Play. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, then enjoy the other podcasts episodes I did on the old show. I promise new shows are gonna get pumped out over the course of the coming weekends, where I have time to record it and whatnot, or days before the weekend, right? And then yeah, I will catch you all on the next episode of the Afterlife Talks podcast. Have a good time zone, everyone. Bye bye.